Rules Committee will come to order, and thank you very much for joining us today. While he's not here yet, our colleague Tom Cole had yet another great birthday today, so I'm sure the committee will want to remind the young gentleman from Oklahoma how important birthdays are. And speaking of, he just walked in, so Mr. Chairman, happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
He and Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, you and Saddam Hussein.
I'm catching up on him now, Father.
Yeah. Well, it's better to be looked at than viewed. I want to thank everybody for joining us today as we're back together for a family session at the Rules Committee. Today, our committee meets to consider H.R. 4414, the Expatriate Health Care Coverage Clarification Act of 2014. This important bipartisan legislation protects American jobs from being lost as a direct result of regulations established under the Affordable Care Act. Today, American insurance companies offer health insurance plans for expatriates, members of our American citizen community who go overseas many times to do business and to represent the United States of America. These plans offer robust coverage specifically tailored to meet the varying needs of this dynamic population that finds itself overseas. Unfortunately, the Affordable Care Act's onerous regulation prohibit companies from continuing to offer plans with the flexibility that expatriates need and require. As a result, insurance companies anticipate that they will move the operation of these plans overseas in order to provide their clients with coverage options that they need. When this happens, nearly 1,200 American workers will lose their jobs. It has been represented to me that these jobs may be lost in the coming months unless we move to act on this important issue. This is an urgent issue that requires our immediate attention. Therefore, legislation before us today will exempt expatriate health care insurance plans from compliance with certain Affordable Care Act regulations in order to allow these innovative insurance products to continue being offered in the United States and to support the nearly 1,200 Americans who rely on this industry for their livelihood. Simply put, protecting American jobs. I think it's also common sense. So I want to thank Congressman Devin Nunes from California and Congressman John Carney from Delaware for their work on this legislation by representing the committee, and I am delighted that they are here for their testimony today. Additionally, I want to thank and commend the Rules Committee staff, especially Chris Verb, Hugh Halpern, Tori T. Miller, Doug Andrus, and Monica Chin. Earlier today, the Rules Committee website received the prestigious Gold Mouse Award from the Congress Foundation. I'm pleased to report that this committee's website has been recognized for its use of ease of use, intelligent design, transparency, and helping Americans better understand the legislative process and more easily approach this institution through a website that is open, available, contains information people want and need, and provides, I believe, information so that people can stay up with the active work of this committee. I want to thank the Rules Committee staff not only for this prestigious award, but to know that we were one of three who was recognized for exemplary performances. The Golden Mouse Award, yet another standard of excellence and performance by the Rules Committee. With that said, before I defer to our amazing witnesses who are here today, I would like to defer to the ranking member of the committee, the gentlewoman from New York. Welcome back.
Well, thank you very much. I don't really have an opening statement, but let me add my congratulations, too, on the Golden Mouse Award, which I, frankly, was not familiar with, but I'll take care of that forthwith.
Thank you very much. We want to welcome both of you. As you know, your opportunity to come before this committee is important to this committee, and us understanding not only the legislation that is contained that you wish to speak on, but also your expertise in representing your committee and many times your party and thought processes which allow this committee to stay up with the ideas that roam the halls, but also are prepared to come to the floor of the House of Representatives without exception Anything that you have in writing will be entered in the record, and without objection, I would like to welcome both of you, and the gentleman from California is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment before the committee today makes a number of changes to the bill. It has always been our intent to offer a narrow and technical solution to the inappropriate inclusion of expatriate health plans under the Affordable Care Act. We have worked carefully and in good faith on a bipartisan basis to craft a bill that is limited in scope, but also one that is true to our commitment to save jobs. The amended bill will ensure that an expatriate plan is a comprehensive health plan and not a mini-med or other substandard plan. The amended bill will tighten the definition of an expatriate. It says that an expatriate must be abroad for at least 6 months. The previous version of the bill said the expatriate only had to be abroad for 3 months or travel outside the country 15 times a year. This is a much tougher standard and will guard against any potential misuse. The amended bill would require an expatriate plan to offer reimbursements in more than 2 currencies. Plans meet this requirement today, but the addition of this provision protects against the possible abuse of the expatriate exemption in the future. Finally, the amended bill will make explicit that the expatriate plans must continue to comply with relevant laws enacted prior to the ACA. Mr. Chairman, this bill, or Madam Chairman, I should say now, this bill, along with the underlying amendments, is a good bill. It is a bipartisan bill, and I urge your support. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Nunes. Mr. Carney.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, Madam Ranking Member, members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm here because there are 500 jobs at stake in my district, the state of Delaware, small town of Claymont, where I grew up, and there are 700 at stake in the district of my colleague here, Mr. Nunes. There's actually something that we can do about it. Thank you. The Affordable Care Act was unintentionally written in a way that subjects U.S. expatriate health insurance plans to all the provisions of the ACA, which places a unique burden on these types of plans. Expatriate health insurance plans offer high-end, robust coverage to people working outside their home country, giving them access to a global network of healthcare providers. Individuals on the plan could be foreign employees working here in America, Americans working abroad, or, for instance, a German working in France. These are group plans, they're not individual plans, and the industry estimates there are a total of 150 employees and 150,000 employees, 450,000 covered lives among the 4 U.S. companies who write those plans. Expatriate plans ensure that these employees have worldwide access to quality health care while working outside their home country. Forcing U.S. expatriate insurance plans to comply with the Affordable Care Act gives their foreign competitors a distinct advantage because these foreign plans don't have to comply with the ACA. It makes plans written here in the U.S. more expensive, which gives companies an incentive to purchase the foreign-based plans instead. As a result, it makes more sense for U.S. expatriate insurers to move their business overseas, resulting in the potential loss of a few thousand jobs, which, as I said, is the main reason that I'm here today. This bipartisan legislation will level the playing field. The Obama administration, in fact, has already recognized that it's burdensome and unnecessary to require expatriate insurance plans to comply with the ACA. In fact, the administration has provided temporary regulatory relief for expat plans for nearly every Affordable Care Act provision that's gone into effect so far. The problem is this relief is only partial and it's only temporary. The administration can't make this relief permanent without a legislative fix, and that's why we presented this legislation. Our legislation clarifies that the Affordable Care Act does not apply to expatriate health insurance plans. It ensures that American expatriate insurance carriers are on a level playing field with their foreign competitors so that American jobs stay here in America. You may have heard that this bill will destroy the ACA or change our immigration laws or give a handout to insurance companies. That's just not accurate, and it's not what this bill does. This bill is about jobs, and I said that's why I'm here. If we don't pass this legislation, people who have expatriate plans and the companies that offer them will continue to do so, the same as they are today. The only difference is that the companies will buy these plans from insurance carriers that write the plans abroad. That means those insurance jobs will go to foreign workers instead of American workers, and that means I'll lose 500 jobs in my state. Madam Chairman, since this bill last came to the floor under suspension, we've made a series of changes to address concerns that we heard about potential loopholes in the bill that might affect immigrants to our country or that might undermine the quality of health care coverage offered here. This has been an incredibly inclusive process with bipartisan input from both sides of the aisle, from stakeholders and the administration. I want to thank all those parties for their participation. No bill is perfect, but this is a solid, reasonable, bipartisan approach to fixing a very real problem. So real, in fact, that in a matter of months, 500 people in my state could be added to the unemployment rolls if we don't do something about it, and I'd like to prevent that. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much to both of you. Mr. Cole.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A couple of quick comments. First of all, thank both of you for doing this. We've had, first of all, I think this is the first piece of legislation I've seen in the time I've been on this committee where they dealt with the Affordable Care Act, where I did not immediately see a veto statement from the administration. So unless there's one out there someplace, you've already passed a huge hurdle that nobody else has gotten by. But more seriously, look, we obviously have as parties very profound difference of opinion about this legislation. But the President's going to be the President of the United States through January of 2017, regardless of what happens. And I think this is the appropriate way to go forward, to find areas where we can agree, make fixes that can happen. We could get lost in our own rhetoric up here sometimes, each side trying to make a bigger point. We thump our chest with a lot of pride on my side that, gosh, we voted 41 times to get rid of this thing. And our friends on the other side like to say, yeah, they voted for 41 times. How stupid can you get? On the other hand, 7 of those actually became law. And they got rid of some things that meant a Democratic Senate, a Democratic President, whose signature piece of legislation this is, said, on reflection, we really don't need 1099s for every $600 purchase by business. That's going to mess things up. On reflection, maybe the assisted living portion of this bill, the Class Act, we call it now in terms of the repeal, isn't financially sound and ought to be gotten rid of. So I see this as another piece of legislation in that kind of tradition. And the fact that it's bipartisan, that it very directly affects American jobs. There's clearly alternatives. If we don't act, there are foreign competitors that will benefit from that. There's no need for that to happen here. So, I want to commend you both for reaching across the aisle, getting this done for not just for your constituents. I think much more importantly, you set an example for the institution. We can have our disagreements and our fights, and that's okay. But where we can take a small step in the right direction to make things a little bit better for the American people or to save or enhance American jobs, we ought to do that. And we'll keep our differences on the larger issues and continue that debate. But where progress can be made, it ought to happen. This bill looks to me like it really is progress. You both really have approached it in a way that all of us probably ought to be approaching legislation across the board when and where we can. So just thank you very much for the effort. I appreciate it. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me remind the all present of the White House statement April 9th when the bill failed on suspension. I'm quoting from an article. The Obama administration says a House bill to change the Obamacare coverage rules for expatriates should be postponed, but did not close the door on altering the expatriate rules. Several lawmakers said on the House floor today that the White House was involved in discussions on changing those rules. Serious concerns have been raised that this bill could potentially create significant loopholes, a White House official said. We share those concerns and want to make sure any legislation does not undermine essential protections for American workers. The House should postpone consideration of this bill till those concerns are corrected. Now, I understand there was an amendment of change, but I would like now to offer, you ask unanimous consent to put Congressman Levin, the ranking member's statement into the record. Without objection. Mr. Levin says many people are engaged in a good faith effort to find an acceptable solution that resolves issues of legitimate concern raised by the legislation. We all acknowledge the unique nature of these plans, but we must find a more targeted exemption that reflects what the company says it does while protecting the integrity of current law for millions of people living and working here. Unfortunately, while the bill before us today contains an amendment that makes one material improvement to the underlying bill, which has been points out did not pass under suspension, many problems remain. As such, I oppose the legislation in its current form. It would be much more preferable for those efforts to find consensus to continue. If not, they will need to be resolved in the Senate, and we will be back here again, still seeking to address the problem. We should get it right now. When we last considered this legislation under suspension of the rules, the administration urged delay in the following statement, as reported in Politico. The serious concerns have been raised that the bill could potentially create significant loopholes. Now, Mr. Levin goes on to give a couple of those examples. We're now faced with a bill that closes one loophole but does not make the other necessary changes to keep it focused. Limiting qualified enrollees to Americans who are out of the country at least 180 days is an important clarifying amendment to ensure that the loss protections and requirements are waived only for those plans who serve Americans that are gone more than they are here. But the language still creates problems by exempting plans that could serve an estimated 13 million foreign workers working in the United States for major provisions of the Affordable Care Act. The standards for the exempt plans remain weak, and the bill affords unprecedented special treatment to those niche plans. How do we say yes to those plans and no to others? For these reasons, we will see continued opposition. Indeed, there is considerable confusion, even by its proponents, of what it does and does not do. And a Joint Committee of Taxation and Congressional Budget Office issued detached statement minutes before this hearing started. According to them, the bill will increase the deficit by $1.4 billion over the next 10 years, largely as a result of reducing receipts from various insurance taxes and fees. Furthermore, they confirm that this bill would cause some employers who would offer ACA-compliant plans under present law to offer less generous expatriate plans that are no longer subject to the ACA. They cannot yet say how many people are affected. In this case, the legislation would undermine the law for millions of people who live and work here, a majority of the time, including some who have been here for full-time for years. Yet, according to the CRS, fewer than 300,000 people are currently in the expatriate coverage. This is an imbalanced approach, and we need to find a better one. I urge you to hold off its consideration until the legislation can be appropriately targeted. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. Would either Mr. Nunes or Mr. Carney like to speak to that?
I would just say, Madam Chairman, that we've worked on this for 4 years. We worked in a bicameral and bipartisan nature. I think it is telling that the White House is not threatening to veto this bill. I just think there comes a time around this place when you have to realize what the facts are. And the facts are that if we don't get this fixed, all these jobs are going to be gone, and expatriate plans will be offered by foreign countries, not ours. So really, I don't think this was ever to be included in Obamacare. It was, and we're just down to a point now. We're done negotiating. This is a bill that will pass. It'll pass the Senate, and it'll go on to the White House to be signed. And if they don't sign it, then other companies from other countries will offer these plans to our citizens.
Would the gentleman yield? I don't have any veto message here. All I said was that this would go to the Senate. That was Mr. Levin.
Yeah,
that's what I said.
But
That's
Mr.
what he
Levin
said.
said that, and it would come back here. As far as I can tell from everything that I've seen, the White House really wants to do this, but they think you needed to go further than you have.
Maybe I could address that, Madam Chairman, if you will. I think the White House does have.
Recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. There is a considerable interest on the White House in making this work. I mentioned in my opening statement the administrative relief that they provided, because everybody that we've talked to that's been involved in this process, and there have been a number of people on both sides of the aisle and in the White House and in private sector stakeholders, immigration groups, labor, have understood that this is a unique and different part of the health insurance market. The industry estimates, as I said, are that the 4 companies that write these plans, including Cigna in my district and Mr. Nunez's district, talking about 150,000 employees with 450,000 covered lives. The concern that's raised by Mr. Levin in the letter about legal permanent residence has been one that we've wrestled with. In fact, there's not a lot of difference of opinion on the U.S. citizens going and working overseas and how they're treated. The challenge gets to be on those non-U.S. citizens coming here to work in the U.S., and the letter mentioned the 13 million legal permanent residents. First of all, we think that the facts have been misrepresented a little bit, and the potential effects of the bill on these people has been exaggerated. Think about the number of people that are in this marketplace right now that I just mentioned, 150,000 that are part of the 4 U.S. companies that write these plans. We've also included provision in this bill that protect both those legal permanent residents and create provisions that make the misuse of an expat plan. The fear is that they will be misused and that these create incentives to use expat plans to hire these legal permanent residents. The fact of the matter is that that if an employer here in the U.S. purchases an expat plan for his employees, it has to be comprised almost entirely. 95% of those people have to be defined as expats, in this case, legal permanent residents or H-1B visa holders. We think that's extremely an unlikely scenario. Furthermore, an employer now is required to provide an expat plan that meets the same exact value standards under the ACA, so as to not provide a loophole for substandard plans. In fact, we would argue that the report of the Joint Committee on Taxation confirms this by proving that there's not going to be additional government outlays to cover individuals who would be eligible for subsidies on the exchanges. So while the bill maintains the option for legal permanent residents and other visa holders to get an expat plan so that they can get coverage, frankly, back in their home country from whence they came, there are also protections for those folks here. This has been the subject of negotiation that included the White House, that included Ways and Means staff on both sides of the aisle, and we believe we have a bill today that's much better and much stronger than the one that was on suspension 2 weeks ago. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you. Mr. Woodall? Okay, Mr. McGovern?
No, I thank you both for coming, and and look, I think this is a legitimate issue. I think the good news is everybody realizes it. I think going to Ms. Lauder's point, I think there's some question of whether or not we might be able to get this done quicker if we continue to talk with the administration and work out their concerns and some of the concerns that Mr. Levin has. Obviously, we're not going to do that, so we're going to go to the floor tomorrow. And you had a majority vote on the suspension calendar, but didn't quite make the magic number. So I assume that you got a majority vote on this tomorrow. Then it'll go to the Senate, and the Senate will have to fix it, and then it'll come back here again. I think for those who are concerned about this, I think the good news is that I think will be resolved. I think the bad news, it might take a little while longer, but I don't question the sincerity of what you're trying to do here, and I think let's get on with it. And the leadership has made a decision to bring this to the floor tomorrow. I think maybe if we had, I don't know what the rule request is going to be, but if maybe there's some ability to allow for some amendments, maybe some of the concerns that Mr. Levin and others had might be able to be addressed. But we'll address that during the markup here. But anyway, I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Mr. Webster? Mr. Polis?
I want to thank both gentlemen for their work. Thank Mr. Nunes for connecting through Denver and hopefully purchasing items at our airport, which we deeply appreciate. I was on the same plane as him returning back. And thank Mr. Carney for his work on this topic. We never get to vote on perfect bills around here, and when we had the chance to vote on suspension around a fix, which would affect some jobs in our country and may affect our competitiveness. I supported it. I thought it allowed sufficient room for the executive to eliminate any unintended consequences and for us to clean it up along the way. I'm glad to hear that the bill has been improved and cleaned up, and I worry that the bar keeps getting higher and higher for the bill, but compared to many of the bills we get to vote on around here, I think this one hits the target. It deals with a lot of the unintended consequences that people fear, I think, with a reasonable way of doing it. I think it'll pass with strong bipartisan support. I want to ask Mr. Carney what has gone into the discussions around improving this bill since the last time we voted on it, knowing that there were fears about various unintended consequences. Do you feel that the new language to the bill, tightening the definition, defining the plan, now addresses many of those unintended consequences that people worried about?
I do. I believe it goes a long way to address most of those concerns. This has been a very tight needle to thread. Mr. Cole mentioned the differences of opinion between the two parties on the Affordable Care Act. That is the political backdrop. And then you bring into the discussion of the immigration law and reform. Thank you, I'm sorry. And that makes it even more complex. In response to the ranking member, Ms. Slaughter's reading the letter from Mr. Levin, I talked about legal permanent residence. That was a difficult one to address. We think we've done it in a way that's thoughtful. We think that some of the concerns that were raised about that were really completely unlikely and goes back to the fact that these plans are robust. They have a lot of things that make them expensive because they have to provide services in a global network. They have to have, as we've added to the bill, the ability to reimburse providers in multiple currencies. And so there are provisions of the bill in the definition of an expat plan that makes it extremely unlikely and uneconomical, by the way, for a company to use it as a loophole, which is what the charge is. We've also added, I think, a really important provision that provides a minimum standard for these plans, which should give members the assurance that they have some level of protection, and it's the same standard, frankly, that's the minimum standard in the Affordable Care Act. That was a huge step forward, in my view, with respect to the parties that were at the table. Are there other things that are outstanding that is a little bit of a moving target? We've worked on it right through the weekend up to almost the current time in terms of getting the parties together on that. But there's been huge progress, and as I mentioned, the concerns that were raised when the bill came up on suspension, we tried very hard to address all those issues that we think we have.
Yeah, we hear a lot about different companies wanting exemptions from the ACA. Can you explain why it makes sense to give this particular type of insurance plan an exemption when we're not giving them to other plans, kind of at the 20,000-foot level? We recently celebrated the Jewish holiday of Passover. One of the questions we asked is, why is this night different than all other nights? So I ask you, why are these types of insurance plans different from all other insurance plans?
So part of it is the fact that the market segment is very different, right? You have U.S. citizens who are getting their health care for some period of time. They're living and working outside of the U.S. They're getting their health care in a different environment. And conversely, you have non-U.S. citizens, foreign nationals, who are coming here and they're working here for a period of time and they're getting their health care here in the U.S. The simple fact of the matter is, though, that the way the ACA was written, it says that if you're a U.S. insurer, like Cigna in my district, and you're writing plans in the U.S., out of my state, your plan has to comply with the ACA. If you're a foreign insurer, if you're one of their competitors from overseas, then you're not subject to the requirements of the ACA. And so it creates a real level playing field. And so as we've been working with this employer in my state, which includes the governor, both of our United States senators, our whole congressional delegation, all three of us, we've been working to address their concerns because they've said, look, it just doesn't make any sense for us to stay here. If our foreign competitors are not subject to the ACA and the tax that's involved and all the rest of it, and we're going to lose business, and they have. And so the simple fact is, we're either going to thoughtfully, in a bipartisan way, create a very narrowly drawn exemption, which is what we've tried to do, to protect those who would get these plans, and they won't be subject to the ACA. Or they're going to move overseas, and they're not going to be subject to the ACA anyway, and we're not going to get the tax revenue, we're not going to get the jobs that they provide. So this is a very unique situation with a very unique market and a set of circumstances, and we've tried to define it very carefully so that it wouldn't create a loophole for others to use to provide substandard plans. And we happen to believe that the Joint Commission report confirms that with what they've said the cost will be.
Well, I want to thank you both for your work. No bill is ever perfect. I would be among the first to admit that the ACA wasn't perfect. This fix isn't perfect, but I believe it will result in a more perfect ACA as, if you will, amended through this process that will help America retain its competitiveness. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Dr. Burgess, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you both for being here and providing us some additional insight. Now, Mr. Carney, you mentioned that these plans are fairly robust. Is that correct? Does this legislation that we'll be considering tomorrow provide an exemption from the Cadillac tax, which is due to kick in 2018?
Well, it does provide exemptions for most of the provisions of the Affordable Care Act, so I would assume that it does.
Okay. Does it, and I mean, your committee is the primary tax writing committee of this body. Did you look into the net effect of that?
I am a member of Financial Services.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Ways and Means.
So, Mr. Nunez?
Yeah, Dr. Burgess, I mean, we're very well aware, and I think it really comes down to these are plans. In my mind, it comes down to the simple point that Mr. Carney made very eloquently, and that is that the issue here is about call centers and the ability to offer expatriate plans from the United States. If we don't have something like this, then the expatriate business is gone. It goes overseas. So this is not an issue of that we're still going to have, we're going to have more and more Americans working overseas. We'll have more and more foreigners working here. That's as global competitiveness grows, as trade agreements expand. And we just got to decide if we want to be part of it, if we want to be in the healthcare providing business overseas. And that's what this bill does.
All right. Well, I thank you for the clarification and thank the gentlelady for the time. I yield back.
Thank you all very much. That concludes the hearing portion of this meeting, and if you gentlemen would like to leave, you may do so. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
This closes the hearing portion of H.R. 4414. Chairman now be in receipt of a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 4414, the Expatriate Health Coverage Clarification Act of 2014, a closed rule. The rule provides 1 hour debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment printed in the Rules Committee report shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
I heard the motion by the gentleman from North Carolina. I defer to the gentleman from Texas, Dr. Burgess, for an explanation of the rule.
The rule for H.R. 4414, the Expatriate Health Coverage Clarification Act of 2014. This is a closed rule, 1 hour of debate controlled by the Committee on Ways and Means. Self-executes the bipartisan Nunez-Carney amendment and provides the minority the standard motion to recommit.
I heard the motion and the explanation from the gentleman from Texas. Further discussion or amendment? Gentleman from Massachusetts recognized.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee grant H.R. 4414 an open rule so that all members have the opportunity to offer amendments to the bill on the floor. And I just want to say, by way of explanation, I agree with Mr. Polis that there is no such thing as a perfect bill, but in this case, I think we might make it more perfect if we had an open rule. It sounds like the White House is in serious negotiations trying to resolve this issue. I think there are some Democratic concerns that I think could be addressed, hopefully in a bipartisan way on the floor. But I think, you know, it would, if we could get this right, it would mean that once we pass it, it goes to the Senate, and they pass it, go right to the White House, because what I fear will happen is that we will get this bill back again, and it'll just delay the process. So I'd urge my colleagues to vote for an open rule.
Yeah, the discussion amendment by the gentleman from Massachusetts, further discussion. Vote now be on the amendment by the gentleman from Massachusetts. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
No. The noes have it.
Roll call, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox?
No.
Ms. Fox? No. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Cole? No. Mr. Cole? No. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Nugent? No. Mr. Nugent? No. Mr. Webster? No. Mr. Webster? No. Ms. Ross-Lehtinen? Mr. Burgess? No. Mr. Burgess? No. Ms. Slaughter?
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Mr. Polis? Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the totals.
3 yeas, 7 nays.
The amendment's not agreed to, not agreed to. So further discussion on amendment. Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion from the gentleman from North Carolina. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. And so this will be handled by the gentleman, Dr. Burgess, for the Republicans, and Mr. McGovern for the minority. The committee will meet tomorrow at 3 o'clock p.m. to consider the Milcon VA legislative branch appropriation bills. Is there any further question or discussion by the committee? Seeing none, we are now through with our work for the day. Thank you very much.